Hi, it's Colleen Schmidt from Divination Counseling Service, here today to present the Sibly Chart of the United States. Though I'm not really a political astrologer, I am a political person, and I do enjoy discussions on the chart of the United States. The Sibly chart happens to be, in my opinion, probably the most used by astrologers. There are several charts that astrologers will use when reading the United States. So I just want to point that out. The one we're going to work with today is the Sibly chart, also known as the Sagittarian rising chart, so that we're clear on which chart I'm using. We're going to look at this chart, and I want to look at the vaccinations. So we're going to actually literally look at the chart for vaccinations long before vaccinations ever existed. But it is interesting, so it's well worth a peek. I did not do the vaccinations for the progressed chart, A, because I don't think I'm going to be talking about that one quite as much, number one. Number two, because that would be, there's a lot of math that I have to do. I have to go literally as old as this country is and add that in degree-wise to the chart. It takes a few minutes. So I probably will do that at some point for something else. I don't think that I'm going to do it for this because I don't think it's really important. What I'm doing for this chart is we're going to look at the asteroids and where they sit, and we're going to look at the chart as it stands. But the reason why I did it was for the Pluto return, and I wanted to look at something really interesting with regard to the Pluto return, which, believe it or not, a lot of astrologers are going to start talking about. So I kind of took a jump on it, but that's because I'm going to look at it through the progressed chart rather than through a transit. Okay, and I'll explain all of that when we get there. Okay. So before I begin, I just want to say thank you to all of my subscribers. I have such a small channel compared to so many other people, but I really appreciate each and every one of you, and I honestly do believe we are growing slowly, in accordance with my own personal astrology, but slow and steady. So I want to thank each one of you for allowing me into your life. I really enjoy doing this, and I really enjoy hearing from you. So hopefully you enjoy seeing it as much as I enjoy putting it up for you. So thank you, all of you. So I'm going to proceed to the astrology here, and we're going to be looking at a natal chart for the United States. The chart is dated July 4th, 1776, Philadelphia, PA, and the time, though it can vary, I've seen everything from 5:10, which is the most common, which is what we're going to start with, and then we'll look at the 5:13:55, which is somebody's rectified version of the Sibly chart, just to kind of get a gist of what moves in that few little minutes. But for people who do predictive work, timing is extremely important, particularly to the midheaven and the ascendant of the chart, which actually form the actual wheel. So the wheel is so dependent on time. So we're going to look at that as well. So with that said, let's go and look at what we have here. So the first chart I want to look at is the actual Sibly chart for 1776, and and this kind of is a really nice spin-off of what I was talking about last time when we were doing astrology. I believe it was one of the not so much the node lecture, that was a lecture, but the chart that I worked on before that had an extreme stellium. Well, so does this chart, and you can see because there are 4 elements in the same sign. Okay, there they are. So we have in this chart our own stellium. And stelliums are what they say genius is made out of. I guess, you know, if you were an individual, perhaps that would point out as being true. But there are things that I really want us to look at with regards to this particular chart. First of all, the thing that's going to be the big highlight is right here, okay? And I do want to talk about this because this is really important. If you notice, just take a moment. Let's look at what are we dealing with here. 6 degrees of Aquarius is a pretty important point right now, isn't it? And just to prove that, let me do this. Oh, I can't do it until I get rid of this screen. I'm going to be darting around a lot today, just have that gut. Let me just go into, here we go, here, down here, okay? So if we're looking right down in here, look at all this Aquarius. Saturn is what I was referring to, and Saturn is at 7 degrees right now. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my chart that we were working on. So that 6 degrees 35 south node, that's kind of being aspected right now by Saturn. Okay, that's our restrictions, especially financially, because that's this. Okay, I wanted to point that out because everyone's so hung up on looking at that Pluto. Let me go back to my pen, so I'll go back where I was. Here we go with me dancing around the charts. This is what everybody keeps talking about right here, that Pluto. And that Pluto is critical because we are coming into a Pluto return. Only countries can do that. People cannot do that. We don't live long enough. Although a chart could do that. Even after we die, because the chart is about our physical manifestation of life, there could be, people could be mentioned upon their Pluto return, even if they're no longer here. But countries literally live through this. This is something they live through. We've been talking a lot about Pluto because it was the Pluto lineup with Saturn and Jupiter that's been causing a lot of our turmoil and with regards to the COVID-19, with regard to this presidential election, with regard to this president in general, the last one, not the present one. We're already in a new age. It's unfortunate because the new president got stuck with that south node, but I'm sure he's going to be fine dealing with it, and I'll get to that in a second. But the Pluto return, it happens at the 27th degrees of Capricorn, and right now we're at 25. It actually is going to retrograde again. So the real return as per transits would not occur until 22, 23. So we have Pluto moves so slowly, that I'm not sure that it will reach it in this year. I think that it does its 3 hits starting early next year. But again, I'd have to double check that, and so don't swear to that. But I wanted to point this out, okay? Because I think this is really important. I am somebody who works a lot with secondary progressed charts. That's why I know how to do the math for the asteroids, and you got to do the math for the asteroids because you have to put a date in the asteroid program, and you can't put today's date and think that it's going to progress to that date. Just give you today's date. Okay, when you do a progressed chart, I'm just going to show you this for a moment. Okay, so let me get out of here. Here we go with me jumping around, but I knew I was going to do this today. Okay, so here's the secondary progressed chart. All right, but look where Pluto is already. Right there at 29. Now, you notice that you notice here, let me just get through this. I apologize for jumping around like this. Very unprofessional, but I'm still playing with software. I just want to show a few things here. This is the progressed chart. I put a lot of stake in progressed. I do progressed work for people. That's what I do. I am a counseling astrologer, so I work a lot more with people than I do countries, although I do have a real strong interest in Hellenistic astrology because I do enjoy history. So looking at ages and the history that applies is really fun for me. Remember that astrology is the study, of cycles. It's very important to note that. It's not a belief system. I love when people say, do you believe in astrology? Yeah, it's not a belief system. Please don't let anyone sway you to believe that it is. It's not. It's a real science. We do tons and tons of research, and I'm alive and doing this long enough to tell you that is really true. just down to that math where I'd have to do to make this the asteroids come up to a secondary progress time for our chart here in the United States. This chart is progressed for today. Now, I still use Philadelphia because I want to keep the place the same, but I could do a relocated chart at another time, but realize that Philadelphia and Washington, D.C. are technically only, moments apart, even in terms of longitude and latitude. But that's not what I'm getting at here. What I want to talk about here for this, and also the moon has changed, okay? We'll get to that. Sorry about that. Stop. This is what I wanted to look at, okay? This 29 degrees of Pluto. That means that this chart's already past that point. Okay, I'm taking a few minutes for that because I need for you, especially the astrologers out there, I need for you to think about that for a second, okay? I have felt this way. That's why when I did this, and I thought, what am I going to do today? And I had a note written down that I wanted to maybe look at the Pluto return, which is really very premature if you're looking at aspects, or transiting aspects, rather. But then it dawns on me, what if I looked at the secondary progress chart for the United States? What would that show me? Well, I think it's really interesting. Okay, so let's talk about a few things. I can use houses on these charts because I am using the right areas. And we could, if you want, change this to see what it looks like if we put it in Washington, D.C. I don't want to do that because when I work with secondary progress charts, I don't relocate my natives. I don't relocate my people. I relocate my people if I'm relocating people or if I'm doing a solar return, but I don't relocate for a secondary progressed. In this secondary progressed, there's a few things I want to look at because it's so accurate. Right now, Apollon is very close to this, right here, which means businesses are restricted. We feel I am restricted. Okay? That also plays in with our social distancing, if you will. What are we most mad about right now? A couple of things. First of all, our independence as individuals. We're struggling with it. Now, I don't want to get too political here, but that also could be the Republican Party, which I probably will do something on, I'm not a Republican, so I can do this with objectivity, but I might look at that party and see what it is they're going through because they seem to be at each other's throats. Now, anybody who knows astrology, basic 101 astrology, can tell you that the struggle between the 11th and the 5th house is the exact same thing. It's the fight to be an individual being overwhelmed by the group. And that is happening because if you're an individual who wants to follow the rules in Florida, how do I put this? Sucks to be you. I mean, it just is happening everywhere. If you happen to be our Senator Toomey, who might be censored by the Republicans, you're going through, I think all of them have been censored. So I want to show that because I think that's really, really important that we, the people, are having a hard time struggling with being ourselves. Some of it is because of money and our restrictions, especially that third, because you're looking, that second house, especially that second house, because we're looking at, I think those are succedent, cadent, succedent. I'm just trying to figure out, well, but they're all the same. If you notice, they fall in the middle of, here's one quadrant, here's a quadrant, here's a quadrant. They all fall at the center placements, okay? So there's a lot of issues about money. Even the fighting that's going on within the Republican Party itself apparently is over money. There's no shocker. Okay, so this is kind of really telling for what is going on today. And look at the changes that we're going through. Now, the beauty of this change, and I want you to look at this. Look where it is. Did we not just say where Saturn was? That is a perfect trine within 3 minutes. That's pretty marvelous, isn't it? Yeah, we are tearing down structures and rebuilding structures. And it also is showing about rebellions. And it is also showing about how people are finding their voices and people are standing up, whether it's against their own party, as in the case of the 5th to the 11th, or whether it be us as the country itself right here. Now look at this beautiful aspect, okay? We have a 4-degree moon on this particular chart. That is in a nice, beautiful trine. We can go that far with the moon because it's a beautiful trine. And coming into trine, it's a waxing trine, if you will. It's a coming together trine with Uranus, which the moon is ruled by. And by the way, in that Sibly chart, we have a 27-degree, let's get out of it. Here we go with jumping around. We have a 27-degree Aquarian chart. Look at that. That means our moon, we the people, and I'm going back to that because that's what the moon represents here, are ruled by Uranus. And look where Uranus is. We're having a Uranus return. Now, ironically, that can happen every 49 years, I think it is. So we have a lot of those as a country. But we're having a Uranus return prior to our Pluto return. And this is important stuff because as we the people are ruled by Uranus, there's a deep humanitarian concept to Americans. We're born with it. It's in our DNA. The stuff we have to deal with is this right here, this south node in the 2nd house. And let me explain that to you, okay? Because it goes against the north node in the 8th house. The problem that brings up is that most of the wealth in this country was not earned in a good way. There was a lot of stealing. There was a lot of cheating. I think it's still going on, actually, to be honest with you. I think that's one of the things that we're going to be discovering during the Pluto return by way of aspect. But the reason why I wanted to bring up this, and the reason why I wanted to talk about these charts, and I'll get to them on the other, so I wanted to give you my motivation, is that I believe that that last presidency was the struggle for the soul of the country. That once we voted Biden in, and I think it happened before Biden. I really want to go back 2 years because I think that's when we actually had it. And when we had those midterms, so it's been on 3 years, in 2018, that's when the beginning of the Pluto return was really taking place. And I think that if we had thought about it on those terms, we would have recognized that we would be okay. That was the beginning of the change. The change is huge now. We're really in the change. Okay? But it's really interesting because the South Node is still there. And when you go back to that chart and you see that the moon, now the South Node has just passed our moon. And it's really interesting because the moon will go one way and the South Node will go another way. They go 2 different directions. South Node, well, remember from our lecture last time, nodes always go in retrograde. So as that happens, and they do continue to retrograde, the North Node will cross Jupiter, and the South Node, how would that? Yeah, would go to. Actually, it is going to Mercury, so it is going more. I guess it's because it's the reverse. See, they always have the North Node and the South Node. See how they're listed? So this is going to go backwards, backwards, backwards. And it's interesting because in the progressed chart, the nodes, look at this. I mean, again, this is really important stuff. These nodes are what we've been through in the last year. I think we should have been studying this Sibly chart. I haven't heard very many astrologers talk about it. I've seen a couple of astrologers on the political group do a couple of what I call progressed transits, and they did talk about some things with Uranus and Saturn, which we just did actually. But and the Uranus here, see this right here. But I really do feel that if we had looked at the secondary progressed chart, there would have been a lot to say about this. Look at this even here. Uranus crossed over Venus. I actually did a chart on that. So you're talking about all the stuff that's happened in the last year or two has been hitting this chart like crazy. Look at this Neptune on our sun. It's just coming away actually right now. We've been in a fog. I really wish I had looked at this chart sooner. We have been in a fog. We're still it's only 5 degrees away. So depending on who's looking at the chart, it's still an aspect. I really need for us to look at this stuff because this is our secondary progress. This is what our country is going through right now, which is why I was curious to look up the vaccinations, and I still may do that, okay? I do want to point out the vaccinations. I have them written down. I have notes everywhere. Here we go. Okay, so in the U.S. chart, and actually, why don't I go and jump? I'm going to jump around a lot today, so let's jump. Okay, so here's our U.S. Sibly chart with all the asteroids, or like I like to say sometimes all the bells and whistles. Realize that none of this stuff was even around then. Oh, it was around. It was around, obviously, because I can pull it up in the chart. But it was not something we were following or understood. Astrology had not reached that point 200 years ago. We were just not at that point. Ironically, more people in government, however, were practicing Western traditional astrology. No, they weren't doing asteroids. They weren't doing trans-Neptunians. Those things came later. I think trans-Neptunians you're looking at somewhere between World War I and World War II, whereas the asteroids are way, they're still naming them. So we're still increasing that vocabulary. So that tells us that, you know, at the time when the government was being put together, they were looking at sun, moon. They were looking at that. I wouldn't be surprised at all if they weren't intentional in that Capricorn stellium chart. Okay. So please, I love for people to know that. Do you know our founding fathers were all into astrology? It was very much a part of their gentleman's club, but I'll go you one further. If you go back another 200 years prior to that, you couldn't even be a doctor if you did not study astrology. You wouldn't be a very good doctor. So astrology has had a very rich history. And with the dawning of the new age, I think it's going to have a very rich future. So, but I did want to point that out. So there's different levels. I mean, astrology is continually evolving. So what I wanted to point out here is a couple of things. All right. First of all, I am going to write on the actual on the actual chart first where these are, because I thought this was pretty telling. Okay. So right here, okay, where you have, here we go again. Okay. So you have to do things more than once according to this chart, and I believe that's true. Right in the middle, right off of this midheaven, okay, is Francis. Remember how I like to just put because we don't have glyphs for them yet. Okay, so Francis falls at 151. So enough to be on the midheaven. Okay. Now, what I thought was really interesting is that Mather, I'm going to jump to that right away, is exactly trine. Right now, Vulcanus is there. Boy, we have a lot of pressure being put, I think, to get these vaccinations out. And Mather might tell us what company, but one company is getting a massive amount of pressure. But it could just be the pressure itself of getting those vaccinations out. Now, what's really interesting is I'm looking at just our country. So our country is really, really pro get these shots out there. Okay, so we're going to go to 1 degree of Leo, which is right in here. Okay, which is in the 8th house. Okay. So it could even come from another country, but it could also be combined resources. See, this F, Francis, is literally 1 minute and 51, 1 degree, 51 minutes off of the Aries point. That's the other thing I wanted to point out. But we have Jenner right here at 20, right in the 1st house. I think our country identifies strongly with vaccinations. I really do. And this chart kind of expresses that as well. It's interesting when you look at it that it falls like that. So I do want to point that out. I'm going to talk about the black moon and the white moon, but I think that the chart, and again, I do not believe. Oh, they could have been. Somebody could have been, because I know I've talked about this, but the black moon Lilith and the white moon Selena have not been discussed. I believe it is Selena. Let me just pull her up. Oh, can't. Let me pull her up. Oh, here we go with me darting around again. I want to pull her up. Yeah, it's Selena. So I was right. So I'm going to be giving a whole lecture on them. I do want us to make a note that the white moon in this particular case is in the 1st house, so we come off as really good. Our politics, especially this, look at that, with Neptune. I mean, right from the beginning, and again, I don't want to speak ill of the dead, and I know that the Founding Fathers might have had good intentions, but they were not, how do I put this? They were politicians. Look at this. And that's in the 10th house. I'm going to really talk about that at another point, but I do want to point out that the black moon Lilith was that I think initially the government it's compassionate. So we'll use some of the good terms, but it also is, nobody figures out our government. I mean, even when Trump did not get impeached, what the heck, let's use the most recent. There were people who had to explain to foreign reporters how he still won. Every time the Democrats lose the election to the Republicans based on the Electoral College, not on popular vote, they just don't get it. In Europe, I don't get it either. I think we should clear that up. But look at that. See, to me, that means that they left a lot of room for a lot of abuse of power. And we're seeing it, here we go again with the Republicans and gerrymandering. Okay, we're seeing it with the way they like to pack courts. So that was kind of left like that, and it might be something we might want to consider in the future. We have, at present, a 7-degree Virgo rising. I'll pull it back up so you can see it. This is all happening in Virgo, but toward the end of Virgo. I haven't timed out how long it will take us to get there, but that's something that we might hopefully address at some point. So we're actually in this house right now. We are actually running right about here. Nope, no. We're going to be running about here, right there. That's where the new chart is. So it's interesting that the new chart is in the ninth house rather, and it is politics. Okay, so the ninth house sometimes represents politics. The actual government itself is 10th. And there is this here we go again type thing because we keep switching governments back and forth. Something else we have to explain to our European partners. So just again, it's really hard to understand. I mean, people in the political group that are not from our country are getting a little bit better because we're constantly tutoring them. But it really is amazing how much we have to explain to people who come from other countries. Because what seems logical is not absolute. Logic is not absolute here. So, as I roll through this chart, and I want to continue throwing these in, okay, so we have one here, that is our F. We have our, I'm going back to what I was doing, we have our J, which is 2543 Pisces. Okay, hold on a minute. Oh, I wasn't that far. That was the other thing. So we're about there. And that is Jenner. Now what's interesting is, so I was off. Jenner is on this chart, and this is the Sibly US chart, not the return chart. So I'm going to talk about this. So yes, this is, so I am looking at it. I screwed up. I put it up here. It did not belong up here. What does belong, oh yeah, I was lying. Something does belong up here. I'm sorry, Mather. Boy, I'm really losing it here. So we have Francis, Mather, Jenner, and Pasteur, which I said we did have. I put Jenner there. It's not Jenner, it's Pasteur. That's what I did, was I screwed up the two. I mixed these two up. Pasteur is right in there, close to the white moon, and seriously, because it's actually right in front of the white moon at 22 degrees, white moon being 27 degrees. I think one of the ways in which we are considered more compassionate, if you will, is vaccinations. I think we are one of the countries that finds that to be a very important concept, and we might push them out in the world. This chart, though, points out where these, and it's so interesting that one fell right on the midheaven. So vaccinations might be part of what we identify with as a country. I thought so, as I remember being a kid and getting vaccinated before I could go to kindergarten. Now my daughter had to get lots of vaccinations before kindergarten, before college. So it's, we are a country that vaccinates. Now it's getting late. It's getting late, and I do want to move all of this to the dial, okay? So the dial is not just how we might relate to our own country, but how the rest of the world might see us. And here, look at this, right there. Look at that. Uranus, Chronos. The authority of our country keeps changing. It sure does. It really, really does keep changing. Okay, here's our risky decisions. Not close enough in the Aries point, but around there. And then we come to our other Aries point, which is right here at dependencies. Okay, so interestingly, let me go back just by the minute here, just 10 degrees, because that's all we have to go back. See how it shortens it up? Those things are still really important. Look at this, though. Mercury to Juno. A lot of conversations with partners. This asteroid is dependencies. So there are a lot of dependencies. A lot of countries depend on us. And, you know, perhaps we depend on them as well. The dependencies are a huge part of it. The other fraction here is, I can't tell what this asteroid is. I believe that's Terpsichore. Yeah, it's hard to see. I had changed the, I believe it is Terpsichore, but I'm going to do it on here anyway. Okay, so just briefly going through, learning this chart a little bit better, I wanted to go through some of the Aries points. And I know this isn't going to be a shocker, but look how close our midheaven is to the Aries, okay, because we have a 103 Aries point, okay? But also look what else falls in the middle there, Bacchus. What I think is awful is that they fed the Indians alcohol knowing that it was probably poisonous to their systems. So that comes to me right away. But it also points out our drug problems. Remember that the Contra affair happened? I kind of hate bringing that up, but that was guns for drugs. Yeah, Reagan and his administration had some bright ideas there, didn't they? Anyway, so that's part of what that is. Makes kind of a pretty picture to our, look at all this stuff crossing to our midheaven. So those are midpoints. I should point that out. These are midpoints. So let me keep going here. So Bacchus shows up, but so does Hecate. All the way down here, okay, is Hecate. And Hecate, oh, it's actually even closer than that. It's like a 23 exact. So we're going to minus this. And it's only 30 degrees out, so I'm going to use it. And it's interesting because it's Chiron ascendant, which Chiron is like people don't follow the rules. They think they're special. Well, sometimes they are. I should put it like that. It's also alternative healing, alternative practices, people who don't take the traditional route, but maybe go on their own in some way. Just don't follow the rules. They're pioneers, right? So that is, what's interesting is that we're a country that Hecate is dreams, okay? So the American dream, there are no coincidences, that I will say. The other thing, and this makes a lot of sense now, it is Terpsichore. And I'll tell you, let me get there. I know what they're talking about now. You know, Americans really do put a lot into what they look like. Do you ever watch movies that are done in England? And, you know, because we can understand what they're saying, or Scotland or Ireland. And they don't put as much emphasis on what they look like or what their teeth look like. An American movie, everybody has straight, perfectly white teeth. You know, they've had perfect makeup, long lashes. I mean, let's face it, people don't really look like that. And so it's interesting that that shows up there. And we are, you know, I think in some respects, we get a little bit too consumed by that, which would also relate to that Bacchus. Okay, we're a little too consumed with that. Adamite is running down at the 15-degree mark. I'm not using that tool yet because I just want to go through this. Adamite is right at the 15-degree mark. That is right across. And what it means is that, you know, other countries see us and we see ourselves as very firm. And it's interesting, we're firm, we're stable. Well, we just proved it. We had a coup take place on the 6th and nothing happened. I mean, they're getting arrested. Hopefully everybody associated gets ready. I'm just putting a little emphasis on that. That was for the universe. But it is something for us that, you know, to look at. The other thing that comes up is, and this makes some sense too, Hephaestus and lies. They would be over here, okay? Now, Hephaestus means strange, odd couples. Okay, so this would be like, you know, and it's across the way so we have in many respects, dependencies are leading toward odd couples. Look at Uranus is there. I need to come back a few though, but Uranus is probably still going to be there. Ceres, I got to go to 7. There it is. No, it's got to be 7. We're so far away. There it is. It equals Eurydice. So we have Eurydice, and then over here we have Hephaestus and Lies. And, you know, it's interesting because, I hate to say it, but it sounds like our government. Odd couples, and then dependencies could create odd couples, and then there's lying. And I believe that happens everywhere. Well, I know that in politics it happens. So we have lies. So I just want to go through that. Down here, not as much. Yeah, abundance. We have a lot in this country, abundantia. Now, not everybody does, no. But what we do have, the wealthy that are here are grossly wealthy. They're not just like a little bit better than everybody else. They're pompously better than everybody else. And Eurydice also points to the fact that the abundance is because of our dependency on other people. And here we go again. The South would have no money if it wouldn't be for slavery. That means they're dependent on slaves to do their work. They were dependent on other people to fight their war for them. Okay? Just think about that. This is our history. And I know there's people out there that are putting together better stories than I am. But you guys know what I'm talking about. How interesting is that? Okay. So the other thing that falls there is Saturn Hades, which I think also speaks to things like, restrictions on dirt, or restrictions like learning about disease, or restrictions because of disease are in there, and that's true. Saturn, though, is the burden of the past, and I can't really put it better than that, because Saturn is your taskmaster. It's your structures, and it equals Hades. In this Aries point of this chart, Hades is the fact that, here we go, I hate to say this, but they came in here and took the land off of the Indians. Yeah. And again, if they were into astrology, they could have figured that into the chart. And that kind of thing that's like giving tainted blankets. There's sort of things that happened in our government that, when it's settled, that just really turns my stomach. And if it turns other people's stomachs as much as it turns mine, as we really begin to learn history, and I do think we're going to learn real history, I think that that is going to really be an eye-opener for people. Let me continue on. So, Mercury's not far from the Aries point. It's a little less than a degree out. I do think we make world news. I also think the news in our country is it's a strong system. It's its own structure, and it's strong. Whether you agree or you don't agree, doesn't matter. The press can make or break you, and that's a fact. Though I do like that the media, the mainstream media, has to follow laws, and I do believe eventually so will the others, because the amount of lies coming out of some of these news groups has got to be addressed, especially if you're going to call yourself a news group. Now, I understand that things like Fox News are not news. They are listed actually as opinion, okay, and entertainment. And I know I've said that before in other videos, but realize that they're in hold by calling yourself a news group. a lie. Okay? So we don't, beyond that, I mean, it's pretty interesting that lies would show up right in that axis. The other thing I want to talk about a little bit is off of the midheaven, we have a Sisyphus. I think I showed it. And I think that that is, even what we're going through right now, we have an opportunity to do things over again. And in this country, when it comes to our future, when it comes to our standing in the world, we do things over again. I think we're going to be hitting that at some point in the near future. We are already in that process. The other factor that I wanted to point out is that there are some things that will be stopped. And that part of what our country does is it lets things go, but then it completely stops them. Okay? The other thing I wanted to point out about Pluto being in the second house is that, even though this is not an Aries point thing, I did want to mention this. Pluto in the second house is running with, and I mean running, I mean it's conjunct. It's about 5 degrees away, but because they're in the same sign, we can say that. Also because it's very conjuncting of Cupido, which is, if you see this, look at this. Okay, see Cupido is in there too, which is houses, families. You know, it's the second house is organizations, buildings. Kronos is there, okay? But at 25 degrees, you have also, or I'm sorry, at 22 degrees, excuse me, right off of Kronos, and then as you get to Cupido, you have a narcissist. And what's so interesting about this is how many presidents we've had, including the last one, that are such narcissists. We've had a few. I'm just going to throw that out there. I think that, you know, we are a very conscious country. We're conscious of things like food. There's a lot of food here. There's always been a lot of food here, and I think there always will be. I think that the food production is something that our country is very astute to. The other thing that we're really good at as a country, and I think that this is going to come into our good stead as we go into the future, is a requiem at the Aries point. And requiem is a sense of peace, that there will be a sense of peace about who we are and what we become. And even as we go through all of the evolutions that we have to go through to become a better country, I think that there's always this sense of, okay, we got to do it, and then just being at peace with it. Okay? They've had to be at peace with having done a lot of horrible, horrible things. Taking away land from Indians, slavery. Even the Industrial Revolution, where they had in New York 400 women die in a fire because the people who were in management were so strict that they locked these women in a room. When the fire broke out, they couldn't get out. The way that businesses treat their employees also comes under this, because it's all part of regulations by the government, or lack thereof. Okay, I'm somebody who believes in regulations, because I think otherwise you're just going to have people at the top continue to rape and pillage your population. But that's just my opinion. The other thing I did want to point out, which I thought was really interesting, and before I end this video, I want to end on a very obvious note. Look at what's in the first house right here. What does it tell us about our government? We're in pieces. As a matter of fact, 50 of them right now. I'm willing to bet 51 in the next 2 years, and maybe in the next 5, 52. Okay, that's my prediction. We'll see what happens. We have a lot to go through as a country, and one of the things that we will be doing is creating states out of some of the left hanging, like Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico. So let me come back to you now. I'm back. So I hope that was enjoyable. I hope it was informative. I am an educational astrologer. I'm a counseling astrologer with a really strong interest in history and politics. But no point getting political, because I already know what we're going through is something we needed to go through so that we can evolve as people. Back in the early days of the civil rights movement, and believe it or not, I'm old enough to have seen the first time around, although I was very young. I did live in a household, though, where there was no prejudice. I did not know how fortunate I was until I became an adult and realized, wow, people are really prejudiced. I was not raised that way. I'm really happy that my parents, well, they were young and they weren't like that. As a matter of fact, my father had black friends. They were in the house, so I never knew that wasn't done some places. So in any event, I really want to leave this on a really good note that, even with everything that this country has been through, and we've been through a lot, and I just saw it on the secondary return chart, I truly, truly believe it is part of our evolution. And as a gentleman, I believe it was a black gentleman, said back in I'm going to say in the 70s, but it probably, somewhere around that 68 time when they were having the civil rights movement, and it could have been even after the death of Martin Luther King. Actually, we lost a lot of people in those couple years. I will have to tell you that he had said that we really need the laws to change, but the laws can't change until the consciousness changes. I'm just so proud to say that I think we're living that consciousness change right now. So, with that said, I'm going to leave you as I always do, that I wish for you only happy readings. And thanks again for allowing me into your life.